couple brings their son Chris to an autism center seeking guidance. They explain that the father's military life forces constant moves, and the director offers a residential placement. The father refuses, insisting Chris must face upsetting things, not be sheltered from them. In a waiting room, Chris mumbles nursery rhymes while working a puzzle. He reaches for the last piece, can't find it, and melts down. A little girl locates the piece and hands it to him. He calms. Now an adult, Chris works as an accountant. In his office, he advises a struggling couple on tax strategies to maximize savings. They thank him, and the husband invites Chris to use their land to practice shooting. King, director of the U.S. Treasury, summons analyst Dana Medina to his office, praises her record, and questions why she hasn't advanced. She insists she likes analysis. He accuses her of hiding her past. King pulls up youthful arrest records and warns lying on federal forms is a crime. He pressures her. Take a special assignment or lose her job. He shows photos of a shadowy figure called the accountant and the criminals he services. The man launders illicit funds and has killed before. King orders Medina to unmask the accountant and close the case by month's end or be fired. At home, Chris cooks, then blasts heavy metal and strobes, rubbing his shins with a wooden rod until it hurts. He flashes back to his mother abandoning the family at Christmas. He takes meds and sleeps. Later, at the couple's property, Chris demonstrates expert marksmanship. He visits his storage unit and trailer filled with collectibles, foreign cash, and weapons. Lying on his bed, he recalls prison, where a cellmate taught him social skills and trained him to handle criminals' money. A phone call wakes him. A British woman working with him warns that people are sniffing around. She urges he take ordinary clients. Chris reluctantly agrees. He meets a robotics prosthetics firm whose internal accountant discovered missing funds. They hire Chris. He agrees to start tomorrow. Medina examines photos and crops a partial face, sending it to face mapping analysts. In Switzerland, violent enforcer Brax stops a businessman in a garage, forces him to promise to stop shorting partners, and beats him until he complies. At the robotics office, Chris finds a woman asleep at the conference table. She introduces herself as Dana, the whistleblower. She assumes collaboration. Chris insists he works solo. During a press event, Homeland sends Medina an audio clip from an attack. They isolated a victim begging before the accountant executed him. At lunch, Dana sits with Chris and chats. He struggles socially but listens as she explains her father inspired her accounting career. Chris covers the conference room walls with math and follows leads until he breaks the case. At home, Medina loops the audio, isolates the accountant's voice, and finds him chanting a nursery rhyme. Chris shows Dana his findings. Money funnels to a shell company that doesn't exist. A shareholder demands answers. Chris asks for more time. Brax confronts that shareholder at night, forces him to inject insulin to stage a suicide or be killed along with his wife. The man injects himself. The next morning, custodians wipe Chris's work from the windows. The owner arrives, distraught. His friend killed himself over theft and he orders Chris to stop investigating. Chris is furious he couldn't finish. Back home, Chris aggressively beats his shins with the rod, breaks it in a flashback of his mother leaving, throws away meds, then calms and takes them. Leaving home the next day, a car tails him. He returns to the shooting range and remembers childhood fights with his brother Brax and a harsh trainer under their father's orders. Inside the client's house, thugs hold the couple hostage and force the wife to lure Chris. When an escort reaches the door, Chris shoots him from outside. The other thug drives them off. Chris disables the truck, drags the attacker out, strangles him with a belt, and forces a confession. The man says he was ordered to kill Chris and Dana. Chris kills him and heads to Dana's place. A follower tails Dana into her building. Chris arrives, sneaks in the back, and climbs to her apartment. Two delivery men force entry. Dana hides in the bathroom and fights. Chris bursts in, kills both attackers, and urges Dana to leave. Brax learns his men were killed by the accountant. Chris brings Dana to his trailer and asks her to wait while she prepares. She explores inside, sees the cash and arsenal, and presses him for answers he won't give. Medina hears back from language services. The chanting may stem from childhood trauma or a neurological issue. She heads to the IRS to cross-reference aliases with high earners. Chris hides Dana at a luxury hotel. She asks about his fighting. He says his dad trained them to endure bullies and admits he has autism, making socializing hard. Dana shares a teen story about learning to count cards to buy a dress. They connect emotionally. Dana moves to kiss, but Chris pulls away, then realizes the robotic scheme. Money gets funneled out and back in to inflate returns. Later, Chris tails Brax. Brax spots him and fires. Chris follows into a shareholder's hotel room and finds her shot dead. Medina and the IRS analyst identify the accountant as Chris, working at a small firm linked to cash businesses that launder his real income. She tells King most of his money funds neuroscience groups. Chris returns to the hotel to find Dana asleep. A flashback shows his father forcing him and his brother to beat bullies. Fearing for her safety, Chris packs and leaves Dana. King and Medina lead agents through Chris's home, noting his odd habits, unregistered weapons, and advanced security. Brax is hired to install security at the owner's house to guard against Chris. King dismisses the team and talks with Medina. She recounts trying to kill a dealer who sold to her sister. She says she harbors no regret. King recounts his efforts to track the accountant. He reveals he once heard Chris on that hotel audio, held at gunpoint, and released when Chris judged him a good father. A British informant's tip later persuaded him to stay in the job. King says a prison informant who once helped Chris was freed, hunted down by former associates, tortured, and murdered. When Chris learned of the cellmate's death, he escaped custody. At his mother's funeral, Chris had a meltdown. A security guard fired and their father shielded Chris, taking the bullet and dying. King explains he wants Medina to take the British informant role after he retires in 7 months. The landline at Chris's house rings. Medina answers and the British woman reports a lead on the robotics firm. Brax spots Chris on the owner's property, dispatches men. Chris kills them all except one, whom he spares to interrogate the house layout. Brax watches his cameras and directs his men. Chris takes wounds but eliminates the attackers and breaches the house. Seeing Chris, Brax freezes, recognizes him as his brother, and orders a stand down. Brax lashes out at Chris for vanishing and for attending their mother's funeral. He blames Chris for their father's death. Chris lets him strike, then disarms the rage and holds Brax at gunpoint until he calms. They reconcile. The company owner enters. Enraged Brax hasn't neutralized Chris. Chris shoots the owner, speaks with Brax, and promises to meet in a week before leaving. At the autism center, another couple visits. Their son wanders into a room and meets Justine, the director's nonverbal daughter, the same girl who gave young Chris the puzzle piece. She uses a speech device that speaks with the British woman's voice. Dana returns home, receives a delivery, and finds a painting masked by a cheap outer canvas. She rips it off to reveal an expensive artwork she recognizes from Chris's trailer.